Good afternoon and welcome back. We are moving into Module 2 today. And Module 2 is going to take quite a different feel than any other math course you've ever taken. In fact, today is really about logic, and we're going to be writing a lot of sentences rather than your typical math problems. So, starting out here, this lesson is on writing conditional statements. And so we've got some definitions here at the beginning. A word you're going to want to be familiar with is the word conjecture, which is a statement that is believed to be true. It may be true, it may not be, but when we make conjectures, we think it's going to be true. And we're going to spend most of our time talking about conditional statements today. Now, that is a statement that can be written in the form if P, then Q. Now, P and Q are just placeholders for different events. Okay, so if I get paid, then I'll take you to a movie. Okay, so that would be an example of a P and a Q. P is what we refer to as the hypothesis. It goes with the if. Q is what we refer to as the conclusion, and it goes with the then part of the sentence. And they won't always use the words if and then. Okay, they'll use variations of those words, and we'll go through a few examples of that. So like this first one says, write a conditional statement from the sentence, two angles that are complementary are acute. Okay, you'll notice they didn't use the words if or then in there anywhere. We're going to be writing the if-then statement. So we may rearrange this to say, if two angles are complementary, then they are acute. And we will throw in the if and then portion. That is what makes it a conditional statement. It has to have that if and then piece to it. Let's try it again. So here's the second one. A team wins the game when they score more points than the opponent. Okay, now here's an example of this. This word when is essentially the same thing as the word if. So this is basically saying if a team scores more points than the opponent, then a team wins the game, or the team wins the game. And that's making a conditional statement. So you're looking for these clarifying words in here. They're not always if or then, but we're going to write them when we do a conditional statement as if-then statements. If, P being the hypothesis, Q being the conclusion. You can even see we've got a little arrow. So if P, then Q happens. We can also write related conditional statements, and this is where it starts getting into the logic portion. So a conditional statement, if P, then Q, we've already got that first one. So the second type is the converse, which is when you exchange the hypothesis and the conclusion. So the then part, the Q portion, it would then be if Q, then P. I'm going to write that right here. If Q, then P. That would be the converse, as if you reverse it. Or again, we're going to practice this here in a second. The inverse, you would go back to if P then Q, but you're going to have these little symbols in front. Those are called negation symbols. I've got that written down here. Okay, so it would change the statement from does to does not. So instead of if P, this would be saying if not P, then not Q, which I'll write right above here as well. If not P, then not Q. So you kind of do the opposite. So does would change to does not. If the statement was already does not and you negate it, it becomes does. And contrapositive is just the reverse to that. So contrapositive is if not Q, then not P. And again, the word not is, I'm putting it in there because it's negation. So if it was, then it was not. But if it started with, let's say, does not, then it would be does. So kind of keep that in mind that these are interchangeable. It's not, you don't have to use the word not. That is just, I'm just using that as an example. So let's practice this. Now, to do these different related conditional statements, you need to be able to identify the hypothesis and conclusion. So if you look here at the first one, I've already done it. Two angles that are complementary are acute. So I rewrote it as a conditional statement. If two angles are complementary, then they're acute. I've underlined the hypothesis part and I've underlined the conclusion. So now when we go down here to the bottom and we want to do the converse, we're just going to reverse it. So it's going to say, if two angles are acute, notice that portion, two angles are acute, is the conclusion, then the hypothesis, which would be then the angles are complementary. Now, that statement in and of itself is not always true. If two angles are acute, that doesn't mean they're complementary. So we're not talking about whether this statement is true or false. We're simply just using logic to rewrite these sentences, or rewrite these statements, I should say. So inverse would be negation P, negation Q. Remember, this is your P, this is your Q for this. So this would say, if two angles are not complementary. Then they are not acute. Again, I don't care if that statement's true or false. It doesn't really matter. All we're doing is the logical portion, is being able to rewrite them. So remember, conditional statements was if P, then Q. Converse is if Q, then P. Inverse, which we just wrote, is negation P, then negation Q. And contrapositive is going to be negation Q, then negation P. So the contrapositive would say, if two angles are not acute, then they are not complementary. And so we're rewriting that original conditional statement multiple ways, including the converse, inverse, and contrapositive. I've got one more example for today. This is a store banner. You'll notice that it's in the if-then format. If you bought it from us, then you bought the best. And we're going to match this up with converse, inverse, and contrapositive. Remember that this is the conditional statement, the original. So the converse would be in reverse. If you bought the best, then you bought it from us. So converse would be number 3 on this list. The inverse, now we're negation. So we're going to take this exact same statement, we're going to do the negation. So instead of if you bought it from us, we're going to change that to if you did not buy it from us. Then you did not buy the best. That would be statement 1. Which leaves contrapositive as number 2, which is negation Q, negation P. So it says, if you did not buy the best, then you did not buy it from us. So learn those patterns. If P, then Q. Converse is if Q, then P. Inverse, negation P, negation Q. And contrapositive would be negation Q, then negation P. Again, P and Q are just representing different hypotheses and conclusions. So that's what your homework's on tonight. Get practice tonight. Make sure you can write these, because tomorrow we're going to dive even deeper into this. But this is the start of proofs and logic. So we want to get off to a great start here. And if you have any questions, let me know tomorrow.